Hello, in this video I'm going to be comparing the Arturia Mini V3 and Native Instruments Monark. These are two VST plugins that are inspired by Moog Minimoog Model D. The point of this comparison is not so much to see which one is more faithful to the original instrument, but rather to compare their sonic character. The first part of the comparison is just using a single oscillator set to square, and then I bring in the filter with the same automation curves to make the test as fair as possible. And then the second half of the comparison, I actually programmed some patches on both VSTs to try and see how they render those sounds. So let's go ahead and jump into this comparison.
So first up, that was Monark, one oscillator on a square wave, filter wide open, some bass notes there. So now let's switch over to Mini V3. I turned off oscillator sync, and then it's the same thing, one oscillator, square wave, filter wide open. Let's see how it sounds. Next up, it's back to Native Instruments Monark, and we're going to close the filter. Just the cutoff. Resonance is 0. Now we're going to do the same thing with Arturia Mini V3. The filter is wide open. I'm going to close it. The resonance remains at 0. Naturally, the automation curves are the same for both plugins to make everything as fair as possible. Back to Monark now. Same test, but with the Arturia Mini V3 synth plugin. Final test now with the NI Monark. Same test for Arturia Mini V3. One thing I noticed is that Arturia Mini V3 maybe has a bit less presence or just a different, softer sound than NI Monark in lower register sounds that are maybe more harmonically rich. One thing that kind of puts them on an even footing is by turning on the oscillator sync on the Arturia Mini V3. So that's what I'm going to do next. So this is the same test series as before, just with the oscillator sync turned on the Arturia Mini V3. So the next thing I did was to adapt some patches from a visual Moog patch book from back in the 70s, because I thought that was a fair way of comparing how both instruments sound. Same sound, but now on the Arturia Mini V3. A new sound on Native Instruments Monark. Okay, now let's see what the Arturia Mini V3 makes of this. For this one, I'm going to turn on Oscillator Sync because I think there's a subtle difference. Let's try a flute type sound on Native Instruments Monark. Let's see how Arturia Mini V3 handles this sound. And now with Oscillator Sync turned on.
Thank you for watching this comparison between NI Monark and Arturia Mini V3. I thought that both plugins sounded great, but at the same time there were some very interesting differences. For example, I think that Mini V3 has a much more dynamic sound, especially over time, than Monark. But then Monark has more welly when it comes to the low end. I think bass sounds on Monark have a bit more growl, a bit more punch than the Mini V3. At the same time, I think that the Mini V3 has more expressive envelopes, and that probably contributes to the dynamics difference that I noticed. And then also that the oscillators on both plugins kind of behave differently. So when it comes to bass sounds, I've already mentioned that I can, bass sounds and kind of maybe harmonically rich sounds on the lower end of the spectrum, I can get both plugins to sound fairly similar, at least on the oscillator level, if I turn on Oscillator Sync on the Mini V3. But as far as I'm aware, on Monark, there isn't an oscillator sync switch. So I'm wondering that if there's a difference in the way that the oscillators are programmed in both plugins. And since the Arturia Mini V3 is supposed to be a more faithful rendition, virtual rendition of the Moog Minimoog, while Monark takes a more liberal approach and it's a more loose adaptation, if that difference was maybe sort of poetic license, so to speak, on Native Instruments' part. But either way, I really enjoy both of these plugins. I think they both have their strengths, and I will use them in my music. So I want to thank you again for watching this video today, and I hope that you have a great day.